Just before dawn, on the 29th of May, 1453, the last emperor of the Romans did something no emperor had done in 1,000 years. The walls of his city, the greatest walls ever built, were finally crumbling. The enemy was pouring through the breach, and so Constantine, the 11th, heir to the throne of Caesar, reached up and tore the imperial purple from his own shoulders, casting off the robes that marked him as emperor, so that he might die as nothing more than a soldier among his men. He drew his sword. He cried out, "The city is fallen, and I am still alive." And then he charged, alone, into the oncoming flood of soldiers. He was never seen again. His body was never found. And in that single instant, the Roman Empire, which had endured for 1,500 years, came to its end. This is the story of the last day of Constantinople. To understand how the world lost its oldest empire in a single morning, we have to go back. For most of us, Rome fell in the year 476, when the last emperor in the West was deposed. But that is only half the story. In the East, the Roman Empire did not fall. It lived on, Greek-speaking and Christian for another 1,000 years, ruled from a single, spectacular city, Constantinople. At its height, it was the largest, richest city in the Christian world, a place of gold, mosaics, and holy relics, guarded by walls that had never been breached in 1,000 years. But by 1453, the empire had withered to almost nothing. Enemy after enemy had stripped it away, until all that was left of Rome was this one city and a handful of exhausted defenders. The empire that once ruled the world had shrunk to the size of a single town, and now a young and brilliant conqueror had come to finish it. His name was Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottoman Turks, and he was just 21 years old. Where others saw an impossible target, Mehmed saw destiny. Capturing Constantinople had been the dream of armies for 800 years, and he meant to be the one who did it. To strangle the city, he built an enormous fortress on the shore of the Bosphorus, at its narrowest point, in just 4 months, its guns able to sink any ship that tried to reach the city by sea. And Mehmed made his intentions brutally clear. When a Venetian captain named Antonio Rizzo tried to sail past the new fortress without stopping, a cannonball tore his ship apart. The survivors were dragged before the Sultan. Most were beheaded on the spot. But their captain, Mehmed, ordered, impaled on a stake, his body left to rot within sight of the city walls. The message to Constantinople was simple. Mercy was not coming. For 1,000 years, Constantinople had been saved by one thing above all: its walls. The great Theodosian walls were a triple line of stone and towers, so massive and so cleverly built that no army in history had ever broken through them. But Mehmed had a weapon that would change war forever. A Hungarian engineer named Orban had cast him a monster, a bronze cannon 27 feet long, so huge it took 60 oxen to drag into place. It could hurl a stone ball weighing half a ton over a mile, and its roar could be heard 10 miles away. On the 6th of April, 1453, the great gun opened fire, and the ancient walls that had stood untouched for 1,000 years began slowly to crack. Behind them stood perhaps 7,000 defenders. Outside them waited an Ottoman army of as many as 80,000. The last siege of Constantinople had begun. The defenders had one great advantage left. The city's harbor, the Golden Horn, was sealed shut by an enormous iron chain stretched across its mouth, keeping the Ottoman fleet out. As long as that chain held, the city could not be fully surrounded. So Mehmed did something almost unimaginable. If he could not sail his ships into the harbor, he would carry them over the land. In a single night, his men laid a road of greased wooden planks across a steep hill and hauled some 70 warships by rope and muscle and ox up and over the ridge and down into the Golden Horn behind the chain. When the people of Constantinople woke, they saw an enemy fleet floating in a harbor that was supposed to be impossible to enter. Now the city was surrounded on every side, and its defenders, already far too few, had to stretch themselves thinner still along the walls. As the siege ground on, the heavens themselves seemed to turn against the city. On the 22nd of May, a full moon rose over Constantinople in a deep blood red, darkened by a lunar eclipse. To the defenders, it was catastrophe, for an ancient prophecy held that the city could never fall while the moon was full. And here, at the worst possible moment, the moon was going dark. Days later, the people carried their holiest icon of the Virgin through the streets, praying for deliverance, when suddenly the sacred image slipped from its platform and crashed to the ground, and when they rushed to lift it, it had become as heavy as lead. Then a violent storm broke, flooding the streets with hail. And on another night, an eerie fog, unknown in that season, settled over the city, and a strange light was seen flickering around the great dome of the Hagia Sophia before rising into the sky and vanishing. To a terrified people, it could mean only one thing: that God himself was abandoning Constantinople. By the evening of the 28th of May, everyone knew the final assault was coming. And in those last hours, something extraordinary happened. For years, the Greeks and the Latins, the Orthodox and the Catholics had been bitterly divided over their faith. But that night, they set it all aside. Thousands of people, soldiers and citizens, Greeks and Italians, poured into the great church of the Hagia Sophia for one last service together. By candlelight, beneath the largest dome in the world, they sang and wept and forgave one another and took communion as if for the last time. Then the emperor rose and spoke to his commanders. He asked forgiveness of every man he might have wronged. He reminded them that they were the heirs of heroes, the defenders of the mother of cities. And then Constantine rode out to take his place on the walls, to wait for the dawn and the end. It came in the black hours after midnight. Mehmed threw his army at the walls in wave after wave. First his irregulars to wear the defenders down, then his heavy infantry, and finally his elite, the Janissaries, the finest soldiers in the world, advancing in perfect order to the beat of drums. For hours, against all odds, the defenders held. But then two disasters struck at once. The brilliant Genoese commander of the defense, Giovanni Giustiniani, was hit by a bolt that pierced his armor, and as he was carried, bleeding, from the wall, the courage of his men broke, and they began to flee. And at that very moment, the Ottomans found a small gate, the Kirkoporta, carelessly left unlocked. Soldiers poured through it and up onto the towers, and their banners rose above the walls. The cry went up, "The city is taken." And it was there, as the defense collapsed around him, that the last Roman emperor cast off his purple and vanished into the fighting, choosing to die with his city rather than live to see it lost. By that afternoon, it was over. After 1100 years, the Roman Empire had ceased to exist. Mehmed, now called the Conqueror, rode through the broken gates and into the Hagia Sophia and ordered that the greatest church in Christendom be turned into a mosque. The last officials of the empire were hunted down. The Grand Duke Lucas Notaras was executed a few days later, together with his sons. But the fall of Constantinople was not only an ending. As the city's scholars fled west, they carried with them the lost knowledge of the ancient world, the manuscripts of Greece and Rome, helping to ignite the explosion of learning we now call the Renaissance. For many historians, the day the city fell marks the very end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the modern world. An empire that began with a village on the Tiber and ended with a single emperor charging alone into the dark. If you would like to walk through more lost moments of history like this one, subscribe, and I will see you in the next story.